I'm Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. Today we're going to talk about transgender, facts versus fiction. Now, why is this subject so important? And I believe it is because there's far too much misinformation out there, and I'm being nice. There's far too much lies and there's ignorance, which is leading to mistreatment and maliciousness towards this group of people, and it's absolutely uncalled for. As of the year 2022, there's been about 250 bills that are specifically designed to restrict transgender rights. In Texas, families seeking gender-affirming care for their trans child could be investigated for child abuse. Does that seem like a good use of child protective services? I'll ask you. In Idaho, a bill passed that could send someone to jail for life if they knowingly give permission for a teen to receive hormone therapy. Now, when we say someone who knowingly gives permission, who could that be? It would be the parents and the doctor. So we're looking at putting doctors in jail for life and parents in jail for life if they're trying to get gender-affirming care for their child. Does that seem to make any sense to anybody? Now, who would be pushing this type of legislation? And of course, it's right-wing politicians, people on right-wing social media, YouTubers, you name it. But interestingly, the people who don't find the transgender community or gender-affirming care, they don't find it to be controversial at all or political, is the medical community. It's the psychological community. So why does this make sense to anybody that it's becoming politicized and controversial by a group of people that absolutely have no education in the field whatsoever? I'll put that out to you. The only time this gets really controversial is when ideologues that are ignorant, that have no background in any of this information, stand in the way of a mental health clinician or a doctor. Let's get to some definitions. Sex. Sex refers to your sexual organs. Gender refers to the socially constructed features such as clothing, how you speak, what you wear, and the role that you may have as a man or a woman. Now, transgender, a transgender person, they feel their identity differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. Now, is this concept really new? We're talking about it a lot now because a lot of people are trying to politicize it. But the truth is that transgenderism has been around since the beginning of time. Native Americans refer to about 3 to 5 different types of genders. And if we go back to ancient Rome, between 2018 and 2022, Elagabalus was the emperor of Rome. And she wanted to be known as empress. As a matter of fact, she offered half of the Roman Empire to any surgeon who could, quote unquote, correct her genitalia. So this has been, and I could keep going on that for a long time throughout history, about people who felt like they were transgender. In other words, what they felt like was different than the body they had, or they felt like they were in the wrong body. But let's get to the real science of it, because that's when you could really educate people about the actual situation and hopefully change some minds. So number one, the interstitial nucleus of the anterior hypothalamus. It's about 2 times larger in males than females. And interestingly, it's female-sized in male to female transgender. That's number one. Number 2, the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis is larger in males than females. Interestingly, it's female-sized in male to female transgender. Number 3, men have 2 times as many somatostatin neurons as women. And again, interestingly, the neuron number of female to male transgender were found to be in the male range. Ironically, when somebody says to a person who identifies as transgender, well, it's just in your head, actually they're right. It does seem to be that it's in the brain. And I can prove more to you here. Now, we talked about three areas: the interstitial nucleus of the anterior hypothalamus, the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, and the somatostatin neurons. The first question that could come up and should come up is, are these influenced by hormones? And that's a very interesting question, because they have been found not to be influenced by hormones. Now, follow me on this. As a bodybuilder my whole life, I've been around a lot of women bodybuilders. Now, this is anecdotal, I understand that, but let's just go with it and we'll combine it to the science. I've been around a lot of female bodybuilders that take a lot of male testosterone. And what happens is, over time, is that they'll get that male pattern baldness, they can grow a mustache, they can grow a beard. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends, everybody's got their own point of view, but their clitoris can grow to the size of a young boy's. So they have a lot of the characteristics of a man. But they're women, they identify as women, they'll say that their gender is female, but yet they take all these hormones and they can actually literally start to look like a man, and yet it makes no difference, they still identify as women. So when I see this, and knowing these areas of the brain are not affected by hormones, it goes along with what I've seen my whole life with women bodybuilders. Although a woman can take a ton of testosterone and literally turn parts of her into a man, inside her brain doesn't change, and it still remains the brain structure of a woman who identifies as a woman. And so although they did not do that study in here, I know the other half of it, so this makes a lot of sense to me. Let's move on. They've done MRIs in what they call in vivo studies, meaning that the person was alive when they did the study. What they've noticed is that the brain activity is closer to the self-identified gender. Again, more proof that transgender is real. Number 6, post-mortem, which means they study the brain when the person's dead. And what they've noticed here is that the structure of the brain is closer to this self-identified gender once again. So we're looking at here is a preponderance of evidence all in one direction. Now we get to a very difficult study that they've done, and I say difficult because you'll know why when I say it, especially for the men out there. Unfortunately, there are men in this world that get cancer of the penis sometimes, and they need to have it removed so they can live. 60% of the men experience what's called penile phantom sensation when their penis gets amputated. Now again, interestingly though, 0% of male to female transgender experience penile phantom sensation. Now what would be the difference? Both people are getting their penis cut off, both with male genitalia, obviously, but one feels that they identify as a woman, which, as we stated before, that there is a preponderance of evidence to show that how you feel as a man or a woman is in the brain. So when they actually amputated the penis on a female transgender, they don't have any phantom sensation there. It's really interesting stuff. It's virtually impossible to ignore this evidence. So let's move on. Again, it's hard to deny this evidence. So who is supportive of transgender people in their health care? Simple question, simple answer. The answer is every single legitimate professional mental mental, physical, mental and physical health organizations. That's the answer. So it's not controversial. It's only controversial in certain areas, right? And again, we went over who seems to be against this. People that are insecure, people that have a strange point of view in the world, but they just don't know any science, they just don't know any better. You know, they might be put in the section of people who believe that, I don't know, the moon landing was fake and the world is flat, right? You know, there's just some people like that. So let's talk about gender transition regret. Because again, when people try to politicize this, they talk about the massive amount of people that do start to do gender affirming therapy. And we're not going to go over that today, but there's a lot of, there's a course of action to do that. And they say how many millions of people, first of all, there's not millions of people that have this, but there's so many people that just regret this gender affirming therapy. So let's talk about that. Cornell University did a synopsis of 56 different studies on this subject. This is what they came up with. Regrets following gender transition are extremely rare and have become even rarer as both surgical technique and social support have improved. Regrets are most likely a result from a lack of social support after transition or poor surgical outcomes using older techniques. Continuing, factors that are predictive of success in the treatment of gender dysphoria include adequate preparation and mental health support prior to treatment, proper follow-up care from knowledgeable providers, consistent family and social support, and high-quality surgical outcomes. Now, the difficulty here in reading this is because this is the conclusion, again, of 56 peer-reviewed studies, is that part of these legislations and these bills that I was talking about before want to eliminate all that. They're getting in the way of their care. We're supposed to live in a free country. We can't listen to our doctors and mental health clinicians anymore. Doesn't make sense, does it? Transgender individuals, particularly those who cannot access treatment for gender dysphoria or who encounter unsupportive social environments, are more likely than the general population to experience health challenges such as depression, anxiety, suicidality, and minority stress. So once again, for all these people trying to stand in the way of transgender people getting treatment, they are actively pursuing and trying to get these people to have depression, anxiety, and to be on the verge of committing suicide. So when we look at Child Protective Services going after people looking for treatment, maybe we need to turn that around and go after the people who are writing these 250 bills, because all of the evidence indicates highly that there's a reason why this treatment is available for transgender people. And the people who are trying to stop it are actively going out of their way to be malicious and to hurt people and to make sure that the suicide rates for these people go up. We need to do something about that. Let's continue. Well, before I do, one more thing here. So therefore, the number one reason for gender transition regret is unsupportive parents and a judgmental society. So again, when we look and somebody says, oh my God, there's so much out there in terms of regret, in terms of their transition, it's a very small percentage that regret it. That's number one. And number two, most of the time when somebody does regret it, it's because their parents disown them or they get treated poorly in public. So again, you're forcing the issue. I don't want to mention any names today, but there's so many conservative pundits that have millions of subscribers and make millions of dollars off of this. One is his big background. He's a lawyer that doesn't work as a lawyer, so good for him. He graduated law school. That's a tough thing to do. And he's also a violinist. But what does he know about this subject? None. And what he says is, is that transgender people and lesbian and gay people, it still should be considered to be a mental disorder back like it was in 1973. Why? He uses as his evidence, it's because they do have higher rates of depression and anxiety. But what he leaves out is that it's the society who doesn't validate them and treats them horribly and actually puts them at physical and emotional risk every day. That's what it is. So if you want to talk about a mental health disorder, give it to society and to the people who know nothing about this community that think that they're going to go out there and change the laws to hurt people. Those are the people that have mental disorders, if you want to get down to it. And before I go, I just want to look at this. To me, it's a very silly thing, but again, people are just talking about it so much and making such a big deal about it. It seems to be that conservatives have an extreme problem with unisex bathrooms, and transgender people might go in and do bad things to people. First of all, the evidence doesn't state that. The evidence states if there is a transgression, so to speak, if there is somebody breaking the law, it's usually somebody trying to go and beat up a transgender person. So it's on them. That's number one. Number two, I think it's extremely childish. We're in the year 2022. I went to Japan, I'm trying to think what year, about 2005. So we're looking at a long time ago now. What is that, 17 years ago? And in Japan, 17 years ago, the bathrooms are unisex. Like, there is no discussion that I know of. So I think it's just really strange how we're supposed to be this big progressive world leader, and yet we seem like we're back in the Stone Ages. I mean, we can't even have a conversation about unisex bathrooms. Although I do have to say, I went to a Who concert. There's the Who right there. I went to a Who concert in Seattle, and in the stadium, they do have unisex bathrooms there. Thank God, because they're mature at a place like Seattle. But in the rest of the country, they don't seem to be. So I'm Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. I hope you found some of this valuable today, and I hope you subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.